This is the Wellbeing Show with Noel McDermott, and we've got Alex Friedman with us as well, and Angela, his partner in crime, will be joining us soon, but we're just having slight technical problems. Alex and Angela have written a fantastic child's book, The Big Thing. Is that correct? It's called The Big Thing, isn't it?
Yep, The Big Thing.
Oddly enough, I was asked to review as part of a news article. And I read the book, and they asked me to sort of read the book and comment on it. And I just fell in love with the book, and I thought it was brilliant. And so I got in touch with my team who helped sort out this show and said, can we get these people on? Can we get the authors of this book on? And thankfully you readily agreed, which is fantastic to have you here. So we'll get into chatting a minute about your book, what it is. But first I just want to sort of make sure that I do all the appropriate welcomes to the show. So this is the Wellbeing Show, as I said. It's live and direct from London on Wednesday, the 20th of May at 10 o'clock. So if you're listening to it sort of on a Wednesday evening or Wednesday daytime, depending on your time zone, on the 20th of May, chances are it's live, which is great. So you can join in. There's two ways of joining in at the moment, which is Facebook Live, where it's streaming through. And also you can give me a call. My number's 07506 319 745. That's 07506 319 745. I'm sure numbers will scroll on the screen or something like that at some point. If you're calling from outside of the UK, it's +44. Just lop off the first 0. So +44 7506 319 745. It would be great to have you on the show. And if you call, the way it'll happen is you'll come through on this thing, and then I'll just put you on and we'll have a chat about it. This evening I'm talking to two amazing people, once we get the second person on, who are not children's books authors out of the block, as it were. They've fallen into this sort of this area of work by a sort of non-traditional route. I mean, I don't know whether there is a traditional route into being a children's author, but one thinks of J.K. Rowling and something like that, who wrote all those books. And I've got a friend who writes children's books in terms of science. So people seem to come from various backgrounds into children's authoring. And like I say, I read this story. Do you want to tell us, Alex, about the story, what it's about, who the characters are, and
Sure.
what wrote it?
Yes, thanks, Noel. Thanks so much for having us. The story, it's called The Big Thing, and it's a story about a little girl named Bee, and it's about how she learns about the pandemic, what it feels like to her, and we tell it from her perspective. So it's all told from the eyes of a 5-year-old girl, and she goes through a period where, frankly, she gets depressed. All of her favorite colors suddenly look gray. She doesn't really like dessert the way she used to like dessert. She misses her friends at school. She misses her grandparents, and she feels down. And eventually her teacher, Miss Eva, asks her if she has any idea of what a silver lining is, and she doesn't know about it. So her teacher talks her through the concept and then helps her identify what are the positive aspects of how her world has changed. And the story takes the reader through her kind of self-discovery about, for as difficult as this period is, there's lots of things that she feels good about. And we wanted to acknowledge that children do get depressed or sad, and that it's really important for their support network to help them find kind of the positives. And we wanted to tell it through the eyes of a little girl. So we went out and we interviewed probably a dozen 5-year-olds to better understand how they see things. And the reason we have the title is because when we ask children about what they viewed the pandemic to be, they can't really identify the specifics of what a disease going around the world is, but they would often say it's a big thing.
Right. And so why did you get involved why did you become interested in wanting to write a children's book about the pandemic? What was the motivation there?
Well, Angela and I have been friends for about a decade, and we're both doing a lot of writing. I wrote another children's book about 6 months ago for my daughter, and we were on the phone when the quarantine first started, and we said, God, this is so difficult for everybody. But boy, it must be the most difficult for children because they thrive on routine, and all of a sudden everything that's their routine has been turned upside down. And we asked ourselves, what could we do? And we said, well, maybe we could write a story that would help children make sense of this period.
Yeah. And you're a father yourself. Was that part of the sort of motivation for wanting to do something like this?
Definitely. Yeah, my daughter's a little bit young still, but my friends' children, I think, almost universally have been struggling to understand what this means.
Yeah. And what about you? Were you struggling to understand it? I wonder if that was part of it.
I'm still struggling to understand it. Yeah. I mean, you think you understand it one day, and then the next day you kind of don't. And it's because, we're all in this, I feel, this kind of echo chamber where news runs around and we kind of react to it, but we're still figuring out what it means.
How are you experiencing the pandemic at the moment? How's it going for you and your family? You're in Wyoming at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm in the least populated state in the United States. So we've been socially distancing because that's just our normal day to day. We see more animals than people, so it's not that hard. But my parents and my sister and my whole extended family, they live in New York City, and my parents are in their 80s. So we're obviously, worried about them and their health, and our friends. Some of whom
you're from New York originally, I think, aren't you? Or you
yes.
Did you grow up in New York?
I did, yeah. And my co-author, unfortunately, her grandmother got COVID and passed away from it during our story. So I think it was very personal for both of us, and especially for Angela.
I just want to let you know, if you see me looking down, it's because I'm grabbing the iPad and I'm going on to Facebook at the same time.
Okay.
So that I can just look at comments and sort of bring people into the conversation. It's just one of those odd things about this style that we have of doing things. So it's very odd, isn't it, at the moment, how much of our life has changed by this experience on this practical sort of level.
And actually, I left out one really important point, which you just reminded me of, which is the book's for free in 7 languages. And the reason we did it this way is for a couple points. First, kids are all learning at home now, and I can't go to the bookstore. I can't really easily get a book. So we thought we would distribute it for free. People could download it in whatever language they want and read it on their computer, on their iPad or phone or whatever. Yeah. And then we realized some people want a physical copy, so it's on Amazon too, and we donate any proceeds to Unicef. But like you say, everybody's looking at their device these days, so that's how books have to be read.
I mean, I've read it. I think it's beautiful. That's why I was interested in getting you both on the show and talking about it. One of the things that strikes me is that there's a lot of thought has been gone into how a child thinks and feels and experiences things. And I guess you must have done a lot of research. Can you tell us about that? What you did in terms of getting that child's view?
Well, we wrote the book after a few drafts. We thought we had a pretty good story, and so we started checking it out with all of our friends and their kids, and mostly we were getting the reaction of that's kind of how adults would think a child experiences this. And so we went and interviewed a lot of 5-year-olds, and that was really an eye-opener. And we rewrote the entire thing.
Yeah. What was the sort of things that they were telling you that were
Well, in our first draft, B had an imaginary friend who was a superhero who gave her lots of guidance. And some of the kids would say, adults often think we have imaginary friends, but really we want to see the world as it is. I mean, I'm paraphrasing maybe in my words. We want to see the world as it is. Kind of don't talk down to us, talk to us like we are little people and, help us figure it out. And so that's what we tried to do in the story. We didn't shy away from the really difficult stuff.
I mean, it's very respectfully written. It isn't talking down, it's very much as a child. So for example, children don't tell you I'm feeling depressed. What they tell you is I don't like my puddings anymore. That's absolutely correct. That's how you know that a 5-year-old is struggling, because they lose interest in the things that they used to be interested in. And that's a classic sign of depression as well. It happens to be there's a thing called a PHQ-9, which is a scoring sheet you do to measure depression. And one of the things is losing interest in things that you used to have an interest in the past. It's a behavioural thing, and that's what you'll get from children is behavioural cues. So I thought it was really, really well observed. I was asked to write a review of not just the book, but of the whole idea of children's stories during difficult events like this. And your book was part of the was the main part of the news article, which was, I think, for the Hong Kong Times or the China.
South China Morning Post.
South China Morning Post. There you go. Thank you.
Yeah.
I sort of it was one of the things that struck me is, and you just mentioned it, it doesn't shy away from the really difficult and frightening things. Was that a bit anxiety provoking for you to sort of be dealing with something that was potentially going to frighten children? I mean, how did you manage to deal with that in terms of your thinking?
Yeah, we thought a lot about that. You know, for example, do you talk about death for children? And we definitely made conscious decisions not to go in that direction. What we tried to do is be respectful of a child's mind needing to understand and make sense of things. And it's just impossible to avoid some of the difficult subjects when you're dealing with, the concept of a pandemic.
Yeah.
So the way we would try to get at it, let me give you an example. When I went out and talked to lots of parents, I'm a parent too, I would hear a couple common things. Often I would hear that parents were telling their children, you got to be really careful. You can't, injure yourself because hospitals are full. We can't take you to the hospital right now. You got to be careful with your, skateboarding or your bicycling or whatever it is. And so we put in there that message. We actually had the main character scrape her knee and her dad tell her that the hospitals were too busy right now. We wanted to not shy away from stuff, but not to go as far as how an adult might, talk about the really scary things.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that a logical way to do it, do you think?
Yeah, it seemed to me very appropriate, because I think one of the things is that we assume a number of things about children, which I don't think are true. One is that they don't know as much as they actually do. So we assume children don't know very much, when in fact they know an awful lot, and they have many sources of information. And one of the things I'm always encouraging parents to think about is the fact that if you're not talking to your child about something, somebody else is. Whether one of their peers.
That makes so much sense.
And so they will be getting information. And so one thing you have to do is think about the type of information you give them. The second thing is that adults often want to protect or shield children from difficult things. And it always fails.
Always fails.
Without a doubt, it always fails. And it always backfires, and it always has unintended consequences. Like, for example, the classic example is sort of trying to shield children from death and funerals. So not taking them to funerals, for example, because they think it might be too difficult for them. Without a doubt, I've never come across a situation in which that has been helpful.
It makes sense. Well, two things I think related to that that we tried to include in the story. The first was, as adults, we can actually adapt to working at home maybe more easily than we expect, because we're so used to staring at screens, right?
Yeah.
For children, even if they're comfortable with screens nowadays, it's a much harder transition to all of a sudden school has to be on your computer.
Yeah.
And we tried to really reflect that, because B has a hard time with that. And one of the ways she also has a hard time with it is she can't see all her friends because they're too small on her computer. Yeah. And she can't smell her grandparents anymore. We as adults, I think we sometimes forget how senses work for children. Yeah. Smell is a big deal. And when we would talk to children about what they miss the most, they would often say, I miss my grandparents. And we'd say, well, what do you miss about not seeing them? And they'd say, I can't hug them. I can't smell them. Yeah. I see them on a screen, but I can't smell them. It's almost as if their world was just turned upside down. And we thought that was important to put in there too.
Sorry, I'm just getting messages from James, who's the technician that people can't see in the broadcast, just saying about Angela and what's happening with Angela and trying to get her in. And he's talking with her now, but she can't connect, and he's trying to get her in. So at some point, Angela will join us, if that's okay, Alex. We'll just
of course.
Get her on. It's one of those things.
So can I tell you a little bit about Angela?
No, she'll come and tell us about herself when she gets in. Let's just stay with And stay with the conversation about B and getting to know B and her story, because I think she's a very alive character. It's quite a short book, so people should know that it doesn't take a long time to read, because it shouldn't do it. Your book doesn't. But one of the other things that struck me about it dealing with so-called adult themes was that obviously as a book it's designed to be read by a parent or carer with the child. It's not something I'm just going to give to a 5-year-old and say, read, I guess. Yeah.
Right. Yep.
And it's designed in that way. And one of the things that struck me about it was that it's taking these big, scary themes about the pandemic and putting them into what is a very loving and very not scary activity, which is reading a book with mummy or daddy, was a fantastic way of making the pandemic feel safer.
Yeah, we wrote this book also for parents and teachers as much as for children.
Cool.
They're the ones who are going to help children through this. And also, as a father, you read so many books, right, to your children, and you read them over and over again. So ideally, you want ones that that the parents can enjoy. And a big part of that was the illustrations. Would you like me to tell you a little bit about that?
Please do. Yeah.
So we have our illustrators from Uruguay. Angela is Chinese and lives now in California, and we had translators from almost a dozen countries. So it's very international. The illustrator did a phenomenal job of kind of magical realism. So if you look at the pictures, he intentionally designed them to be the way, say, a child might see things.
Yeah.
So for example, the father's beard goes all the way up to his eyes.
Yeah.
And that's not how normally beards grow. But if you talk to children and they talk about their father's beard, they might actually sketch it out on a piece of paper and have the beard go all the way up to the eyes. And so this magical realism element makes an extremely difficult subject, even in words, a bit more kind of palatable, even the hardest stuff.
Yeah. What I'm going to try and do is, while we're talking, so again, if I seem distracted, don't worry about that. I'm going to go and try and find my copy of The Big Thing. And then maybe start showing some of it, screenshots on the screen. So let's keep talking. I've said right at the beginning of the introduction, you had a sort of non-traditional way of coming into being a writer of children's books. So maybe we could get to know a little bit about you and your background, because again, coming back to my earlier point, there's no, all the children's authors that I know have come from a variety of backgrounds, and there's no one particular one. But yours in particular seemed to me interesting in that there was nothing about your career that would suggest that at some point you're going to end up writing children's books about pandemic. So what was your career, Alex? What was tell us about your background.
Sure. Just before I do that, I guess today we kind of assume there's a linear path for many people because our society's become so specialized. Not that long ago, people did lots of different things. They didn't necessarily have a perfect trajectory that made sense. So I guess mine's more in that category. Yeah. I worked in the White House for Bill Clinton. I worked for Bill Gates at his foundation. That was interesting. And then I was in business for about 10 years. I was CEO of a public company. And I write a lot, but mostly op-eds. So I've written about 100 op-eds. Oh, I see Angela's made it now.
She's just connected.
Hi.
Hello, welcome back. How are you?
Hi. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty there.
It's okay, don't worry about it. It's good to have you with us. And your sidekick, your partner in crime, Alex, has been sort of manfully carrying on.
I'm glad the brain is here now.
Somewhere with this panic there in the back of his mind, but managing to. Angela, welcome. It's really, really lovely to have you on the show. So Angela is the other co-author of the book, The Big Thing, that we've been, and just introduce you to the audience. Angela's in San Francisco at the moment. Alex is in Wyoming and I'm in London, and this is the way life is at the moment. So we have this very odd international sort of experience going on, and somehow this pandemic has just It's done something that I didn't think was possible, which has really brought people together internationally in a way that I've never seen before. One of the things that has struck me during my period of time in lockdown in London was that how not like all those zombie films this pandemic has been. It's been the opposite experience, because of course in all the zombie pandemic films that have existed up to this point, and even in all the non-zombie pandemic films that have existed, society has broken down and people have started killing each other and eating each other and getting death. And the absolute opposite has happened. The absolute opposite. What seems to have happened is that people have come together. Certainly in my community, and when I talk to my friends over in the US as well and around the world, there's been a real sense of community emerging from this. And I was also, without getting too highfalutin about it, just thinking about the responses of many governments about it has been to reinstate the social contract between themselves and ordinary people. So we think about all these economic bailouts. So we think about the 2008 banking crisis, the economic bailouts, bailed out. The people already had lots of stuff anyway. And the ordinary person on the street, the ordinary Joanne on the street, didn't get very much. But this time around, it's been very, very different. So the economic bailouts, the job retention schemes, etc., have been aimed at ordinary folk for good economic reasons, I think. But it's been very, very different and very markedly different. And also what we've done in this pandemic is we've protected the vulnerable. So I'm not particularly at risk from the virus. I might, if I got it, I don't know. Maybe I'd be unlucky. I'd have to be quite unlucky to have a serious reaction to it. On the whole, I'm not a high-risk group. But it's been no problem at all to think, okay, I'll give up my freedom to protect people more vulnerable. And that's really what's been happening. We as cultures and as societies, which again is the opposite of all these pandemic films and of all these zombie apocalypse stories. It's every man for himself in those stories, but that hasn't happened.
We had a version of this. Maybe Angela can weigh in, but we had about 6 or 7 people in 6 or 7 different countries come together and work on this really fast, never having met, for no money. Angela organized a lot of that. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, do tell us. How did it come together in that way, Angela?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Noel. I think that, the ironic thing to come out of a global quarantine is actually, at least for me working on this project, a kind of communal spirit. That, we have now like almost 10 people who all have, normal jobs and are living, sort of, for many of them, living paycheck to paycheck as artists or translators or publishers. And all of them have decided to dedicate their time, very precious time and resources, to creating this nonprofit project. And so it's been, a really wonderful experience. And I think whenever we go through challenges as a community, as a species, we see, sort of total devastation on one side, on one end, and then complete benevolence on the other. And we've been very lucky to experience, sort of the latter half of the spectrum there.
Yeah, has that been your experience, not just in the project though, in terms of your experience of the lockdown as a pandemic, where you're living, for example, in San Francisco and in Wyoming?
Absolutely. I actually just came back right before I got on the call, because it's only 1 p.m. here in the afternoon, as you can clearly see. But I just got back from doing sort of my daily social distance walk, where I go to a very small nearby park and just kind of walk around for a couple of times just to get some fresh air. And a security woman at this park, she's like, has her little mask on, and she's kind of patrolling the place, and she says, "Hello, hope you have a lovely day. Hope everyone in your family is safe and sound," to every single person she passes. And she just sort of brightens, everyone's day, everyone who walks past her. And so I've seen that kind of, just from the sort of the details of everyday lives, and people being really, really kind and generous to each other. Yeah.
Was that part of the motivation in wanting to write this, in terms of wanting to give something, that sense of altruism?
I'm a little late to the party, so I don't know if Alex kind of took you through already our story of why we decided to write this.
Just a little bit, Angela.
But
You should do the broader one.
but yeah, it was just one day we were on the phone. We were all kind of frustrated. We were all in lockdown, and it had only been 1 week, and we were already memorizing the gradient of our bedroom sunsets because we are of a privileged group who, you know, were able to be quarantined. I have some family members in China who were not quarantined. They still had to go to work. And we were thinking about what we can do sort of to contribute something good to this crisis. And at one point we realized that for those growing up during this crisis, Generation C, some are calling it, their lives will be profoundly altered by what happens during this period. Just like the people who grew up, you know, for example, during the financial crisis, who just graduated college from the financial crisis. And so we wanted to write a story for them, for the children who, you know, are going to spend 1 or 2 or even 3 of their most formative years indoors, not being able to see their friends or go to the beach freely. So we decided to write a story for them.
Okay. And what was Maxim, because you're not a parent yourself. I understand that Alex is, but you have your own children. So why a kid's story as opposed to an adult story for you? I'm just interested on a very personal level, really, I guess.
I mean, besides the fact that we're mediocre writers, and can only, you know, muster like a few words from our very tiny vocabulary. We thought it was, you know, we were talking to our friends and our friends who have children, you know, like our families, and it was something that we felt was, you know, children are so affected by something like this, like Alex said, because, you know, they thrive on routine, they thrive on stability and structure. And when something like this happens, you know, all of a sudden everyone is home. You can't go out and see your friends. Summer camp is canceled. You go to school on the internet. All of these things are disrupted. And so in a way, I felt that, you know, at this time, this is the kind of time that forms sort of how a child deals with important challenges in the future.
Yeah.
And so whether, you know, there's going to, you know, life is difficult. Life throws challenges at us and, you know, in every corner. And it should, because, you know, it's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be worth it. But how we deal with those challenges is what makes us, you know, the people we are. And so whether it's, you know, a divorce or a war, somebody going bankrupt or something really, really difficult happening in the family, children have to learn at a very early age how to deal with those difficult subjects. And this is simply one of them. Yeah. And of course, writing a children's book is, in terms of timeline, we wanted to get it out as soon as we could. We wanted to put sort of full throttle. And of course, writing a novel would take months, if not years. And a children's book is relatively speedier.
Yeah, I mean, I think the novels will come at some other point and people will have very clever thoughts about it. I mean, one thing that strikes me is that although it's a children's book, it's actually a book, which is a story about something that's big and scary that's going on. And when we had our research chat earlier in the week, I think I introduced you to the idea of one of the sort of psychological theories about how we function is called transactional analysis, and it has this idea that we have an internal parent state, an internal adult state, and an internal child state. And it's a way of thinking. It's not a neurological fact. There isn't an adult bit of your brain and a child. It doesn't work like that. But it's a way of metaphorically thinking about how we've organized our psyche. And so for me, there's something about when we read a children's book, we're reading as the child inside ourselves and to the child inside ourselves. And for me, I think there is something about this pandemic that pushes everybody into potentially a child state in terms of the capacity to cope and bringing up child experience. So I think children's books have a much bigger application than just the target audience, is what I'm saying. Which is
absolutely.
Harry Potter is so fantastic and so wonderful, is because it speaks about difficult topics in an accessible manner. And I think that's another way of thinking about a children's book, that they're very clever in that they talk about and think about difficult topics in a very accessible way that everybody can relate to. Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
Noel, I might be going out on a limb here a little bit because I'm not at all a trained psychiatrist or psychologist at all. But it strikes me that one of the challenging parts of being a child, if I can channel my inner child, is that you have no control over things. And that's one of the reasons, and the world is, you know, basically confusing. And that's as we grow up, we start to make sense of it. But when you're a little child, 5 years old, a lot of the comfort we derive is from the routine because we know what's going to happen or we're familiar with why something is happening. And I think the pandemic does the same thing for a child as it does for an adult now, which is, as an adult, we have no more control. Like all our plans are out the window.
Yeah.
Are we going to be able to move where we thought we were going to move? What about the job? What about our ability to be with our parents, right? All this stuff that we took for granted.
Yeah.
Suddenly we don't even know what tomorrow will look like. Yeah. And so to your point, we're a lot like children now.
I think so. I think very much so. I think I would challenge one aspect of your statement, which is that if we give a child control, we're actually hurting them. Mm. And there's something about a child that shouldn't have control, and they should be able to trust that the trusted adults around them have that control for them, you know. And so abusive children is often giving them far too many adult things to. So, and we'd start to touch upon that thing because I think a lot of adults will be anxious about putting adult themes in a book. Now, this is a book that is dealing with really adult themes. This is a pandemic that is affecting the whole planet, because that's what a pandemic is, and people are actually dying of it. And that's a courageous subject to choose for a children's book. It's not princesses and it's not seahorses. It's something real that's going on at the moment that's frightening and killing a lot of people. I mean, it was quite a courageous decision, I think, to decide we're going to write this book about the pandemic. I mean, I fully support it. I think it's brilliant, which is why I wanted you on the show. And I'm just trying to, at the moment, if you see me distracted, it's because I'm messaging my team saying, have we got a copy of the book anywhere? Because I want to share it. I want to screen share it with people so they can see some of it, because it speaks for itself. And I think it's one of those things that does speak for itself. But that's quite a courageous decision to choose millions of people potentially dying of something as a theme for a book. I mean, it seems mad on one level, but also brilliant. I mean, why choose? How did you get to that point?
Angela, you take this one because you're the one who wrote the subtitle "Brave Bia: Find Silver Linings in a Pandemic." I mean, you were really the inspiration.
Well, first of all, I think thank you. That's so very kind, and I think it's. I mean, it would. I don't know. I'm not sure if I would call it brave. I think it's a topic that absolutely needs to be covered because, like you said, no, it's everyday life. That you know, as humans, we're extremely adaptable, and now I've gotten completely used to putting on a mask and wearing some gloves when I go outside or when I go grocery shopping. So we're extremely adaptable, and it is, you know, life as we know it at this moment in time. And like I said earlier, I think that, you know, there's so many challenges that life just naturally happens to us in life, and how we deal with those challenges is what makes us who we are.
True. You're both like my research chat, so I'm going to push you a little bit because I think you're both a bit like this in research chat. It's like you come up with these really interesting answers, which are not really getting me where I want to go. So I'm going to be a bit pushy if that's
okay.
All right, where do you want to go? I'll go where you want to go. I'll follow you.
Let me make it really simple. The point I'm making is that you two chose to do this, and there's something about you as individuals and as friends that made you want to do this. And so I'm quite interested in finding out what got you as individuals and as friends to the point that this, not in a linear sense, not in a simplistic, oh, well, I met with my friend, she thought it was a good idea, and then we did. Okay, not in that sense. But what was motivating you? Well, so I know, for example, Angela, that people don't know on the show, that you are from China and your parents came to the US, I think when you were 9 or something, is that right?
When I was 10.
you were 10. And so you're brought up in a system whereby there's only one child in a family. You're it. And so you were the hopes of the whole family, as it were, as a single child, but in a culture that also sort of has that imprinted on it. And then there's a pandemic going on, which a racist chief of staff will associate with your country of origin. Okay. And so those types of things. So what is it that what sort of things, I suppose, in your experience of growing up with your parents, etc., or your experience in life have led you to the thinking that you have now, which I concur with. As a psychologist, I would say, you have to find the silver lining in things. Positive psychology is the only way to deal with things. Positive psychology, particularly during a pandemic, is absolutely essential if you don't want to get PTSD, post-traumatic growth. So you've got all the correct paraphernalia, Angela. So well done. How did you do it, I guess, is my question.
So I think like many children, especially children growing up with post-cultural revolution Chinese parents, I have a very, very complicated, relationship with my parents. And there were parts of my childhood in which I felt completely safe and unconditionally loved. And there were periods in which I felt that I had to perform in order to be loved by my parents. So I think there is probably a part of me that, the message that I'm maybe unconsciously or subconsciously sending with this book is that that no matter what the challenges are, if we pay attention, if we take the challenge in parts, there is always something good about it. There's always a good side of the bad. There are always silver linings. And when doors close, other doors open. And, I think going back to me as a kid, that's something I would have loved to know explicitly. Okay. That no matter what happens, things are going to be okay, that there will be good things and bad things.
So my interpretation from that is that that wasn't your family culture necessarily.
I'm not sure they were equipped to, I'm not sure that they were equipped to say that explicitly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, neither were my family. I mean, it was sort of very much, my family was based upon a deficit culture. There was trauma. There were inherited disabilities going down many lines. My parents, great parenting. They did the best job they could. I wouldn't dream criticizing them. And I've been lucky enough in my life to have had access to good psychological therapies that have taught me a lot, much more effective coping skills. I'm guessing, I'm interpreting from your style of talking that something similar has happened to you, that you found ways in adult life of beginning to process maybe some of those deficits. What sort of things have helped you and that you'd be willing to share, I guess? And that, because I think those are the things, I believe, that have informed who you are, to the point where you wrote a fantastic book about a pandemic, in the middle of a pandemic, for children, which I think personally is a stroke of genius, right? I absolutely do think that's a stroke of genius. Well done. And I'm fascinated by your journey and Alex's journey to that stroke of genius, because I think that's really what is encapsulated in the story. Because yes, you've got words and you've got pictures and you've got a narrative and you've got all that, but really it's you two in that. It's you two that created it, and you created it as individuals. So it's that. So you didn't have a family which necessarily encompassed all these skills, but somehow you learned them. So what was that story, if you don't mind sharing it with us?
Again, you're being very kind. I think we are all sort of coping with, our inner demons, our, egoic mind, whatever you like to call it. I personally have tried many things to try and find what some people would call authentic self or peace. Some people would call it God. I've personally tried many things. I've tried yoga, traveling, like sort of try to find it in personal relationships, romantic relationships. I've tried to, there are these workshops in which people go and try to buy enlightenment, as I'm sure you're aware of. Where like, oh, okay, like three lessons, and I feel so much better. Everything is cured. I have so much more energy. I love my family. I've tried those as well, and I think what works a lot for me, what helps me to be present in the moment is a combination of meditation, healthy habits, maintaining great relationships with my friends and family, and working on the things I love, which is something like this book. Yeah. And the meditation part is something that we actually try to insert into the book. As you can recall, there's a part of the book in which Bia, our protagonist, she's very worried, she's very anxious, she's starting to exhibit the symptoms of some sort of mild depression. Yeah. And she speaks to her teacher over something like this, like a Zoom chat, and her teacher says, okay, tell me how you're feeling. And she speaks to her teacher, she tells her all of her worries and her sadness and her disappointments, and then the teacher says, okay, now if we pay attention very, very closely, can we find a silver lining in, working at home? Can we find a silver lining in the current predicament? And that was sort of, I think, my way of inserting my love of meditation into the story, which is to say, each moment taken by itself, no matter how painful, is always tolerable and is sometimes beautiful. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
No, it answers it beautifully. And I think, let me describe why it answers it beautifully. Because I think that, the best children's books, what they do is, it's almost like there's a thing called timeline therapy. Is a technique where you ask an adult now to go back in time to a point where they were hurt or traumatized, and then say, well, if you could do that in your life, you could go back to that frightened child that got hurt. What advice would you give to them that would mean that there wouldn't be so much damage from this experience? Okay, and you can it's a very effective technique, and you can fly people just before the damage, and they can give themselves advice prior to this trip. And so I think there's something like that happens when an adult writes a book for children. In the best children's books, is that they do exactly what you just described, which is they fly back in time to that child they were that needed the advice when they needed it, and they give it. Yeah, and then that resonates through the narrative, that emerges through the narrative, and that's what was striking me about the book. Was that the moments like that where I could see that there were adult authors who obviously had difficult times, could empathize and understand, they could write a book at difficult times, but also could come up with solutions.
Yeah. There's a part in the book where, she begins to pay attention, and she notices that the sky is bluer, and her, it's bluer than even her favorite sweater, which is blue sweater. And that's something that I've noticed in my own life, which is that in times when I'm when I'm suffering, or when I'm in a lot of pain, and I wake up feeling like the world might be 2 sizes too small to contain all the pain, we miss out on all the beautiful things. Like if I was sad and there was an incredible waterfall with a rainbow and a unicorn in front of me, I would still just ignore it and focus on the pain. Yeah. And so that was our way of one, of course, there's also sort of the climate activism kind of angle on it, in which, she notices that because the world has stopped, the sky had a little bit more time to become blue. But then there's also the other aspect of why the sky is bluer. It's bluer because she's noticing it. It's bluer because she's paying attention. And that's, what I find is that when we really pay attention, everything becomes more beautiful. There's beautiful even in the dreary things, because it's a dreary world, but it's also a beautiful world.
That skill in particular is something that children naturally have, but when they're depressed, they forget. like anybody, but a child naturally has the capacity and the skill to focus on the here and now. That's what we're talking about, which is a really important skill that I teach adults all the time, because adults often they forget this capacity to just stay in the moment, and this moment will be okay, and they go off into the future with all the scary thoughts about economic crashes, or they go into the past with all the stuff that you can't change because it's happened. It's only in your head now, and they forget that this moment can be okay. But children are uniquely brilliant at that, and that's one of the things, and you know this, Dad, even though she's still quite young, yours, is that she's noticing everything in the moment. Yeah, please go ahead, Alex.
I was just going to say, one of the things that I'm struck by that is that, and every parent has experienced this, you know, if your baby falls on her head, mine's 14 months, so more of a toddler, falls on her head, she'll start to cry. And then if you, you know, pick her up and point her at something interesting, she'll stop crying because she's interested in what you pointed her at. She immediately sees the present and forgets about the past.
That's a standard technique I'll teach parents, is we call it distraction. Don't try and pick up a child that's really disturbed about something. Just distract them. Just show them a pretty flower. And that'll work much more effectively than trying to give them a hug. Because they'll
So you just hit the nail on the head of why we wrote this book. So Angela and I, friends for 10 years, sitting there talking on the phone, lamenting the state of the world a week into the quarantine. And what could we distract ourselves with that we thought would be positive and constructive? And, you know, surely there was lots of psychology in our past and the way we grew up that, you know, informed a decision or how we tackled this. But that was the main reason we did it. We wanted to see a flower.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a perfect way of describing it. I've got a couple of pictures which James has got. I'm still trying to get my team to get a few more pictures from the book. I don't know if you've got a copy of the book anywhere that you can email through to James, and we can go through some of the images. Have you got a copy there with you?
It's really easy for James. Just go to thebigthing.org and you can download the book right there. It's faster than emailing it.
Do that, thebigthing.org. But James, I want you to screen share the two images that you got. I'm going to rewind the conversation a little bit, because we were talking just before you got on with us, Angela, about how one of the things I love about the book is that it describes how a child might experience something from a child's perspective. That's the cover. James, have you got the picture of the knee being scraped? James will search through. This conversation Alex and I were talking about depression in children, for example, because one of the themes in the book is it describes, there we go. So Alex, you were talking to me about this image. Can you see it?
Yep, I see it.
So, and how sort of it's beautifully observed, the fact that, you know, so thinking about the dessert, she worries so much that dessert, like mum's cupcakes, no longer tastes as sweet, which is how a child will express being depressed, because they'll lose interest in things that they normally had a lot of interest in. So I just thought that was a very beautiful way, and it shows the sort of the illustrations, but also the concepts. Now, a child, if you're reading that story to them and they're feeling sad and depressed, they will get that immediately. So if you're a parent and you're sitting with a child and you read this story and then they respond to, you will know automatically in their response whether your own child is feeling depression or sadness about this thing or not as well, because of their response to that. Because the child will read that and just go, oh yeah. Then their response to it will tell you whether or not they're identifying because they're experiencing it, or they're empathizing because they understand that a friend is sad. Yeah. And they have other friends. And then the other picture is when Bee falls down and scrapes her knee, her parents patch her up and tell her she needs to be extra careful because the hospitals are very busy right now. And which I think is a brilliant description of what we shouldn't be doing to children at the moment during this pandemic, is dumping our adult fears upon them about this. But it's also, I think it's a beautiful illustration of something Alex was saying about the pictures and how they're drawn in a way that a child sees the world. So you've got this ridiculous beard on this dad.
A quarantine beard.
Yeah, but also no beard actually does that, does it? Except from a child's perspective, that it does absolutely do that, and the child will pick out certain aspects and features. So I wanted to show that. Thanks, James. That's enough of that. If you get some other images, James, let us know once you've downloaded the book, and then he'll message me. James will message me once he's downloaded the book, and we can go through some more of the images. I particularly want to show some of the things that we've been talking about just now, Angela, about the moment of mindfulness and meditation as well. And you were saying, Alex, that part of your motivation for writing this was to be able to distract yourself, as it were, with this flower, because you've been feeling some anxieties and fears and a bit of difficulty in getting into the moment, as it were. And sort of, so tell us about that. What's, I guess, your experience of the lockdown a bit more, and what's going on for you?
Okay. Well, for me, I've been working in business for the last decade and working really long hours and striving for, success in a high pressure environment. And then when we had our baby, we decided to take some time off. So we moved out here to Wyoming and been full-time parents. And I was about to go back to work, I thought, when the pandemic came. And so, like many people, I feel a lot of uncertainty around what the future could look like for me personally. Will I get a job? Should I do something like I was doing before? Is this not a call to action to do something that maybe is more meaningful? And so when Angela, was her idea, came up with this idea to write this book, to be, really candid, it was like, yes, this is something that I can do in the here and now that will bring me real satisfaction and be positive, and that I can, get behind 100%. Like, there was nothing about it that was a rationalization.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to say this is worth doing. It was just a pure, wonderful thing we wanted to do as longtime friends, and that was half of it. Like, working with somebody you really care about, which I do for Angela, is a really lovely way when you're feeling uncertain to, I guess, do something where you have a little bit of, positive, constructive kind of momentum or something.
And one of the things that really is interesting that strikes me about both of you, and I know a little bit about your backgrounds, we've heard a bit about yours, Alex, in terms of, having worked with the president, having been a very sort of high echelons of society. Angela, you also have been a very, very much a high performer in life, haven't you? You've been incredibly successful in your previous career. Is it a previous career now in finance, for example?
Yes, I worked in finance, yes.
But you were also very successful. I mean, I know you're a little bit reticent about talking about it. Alex will probably tell.
I can talk about it for her.
Because I know you won't, Angela. You'll just go, yeah, it was fine, whatever.
Yeah.
Alex, she was very successful, right?
Oh yeah, it's total superstar.
Yeah, and so she was working for what sort of company?
One of the top investment banks in the world, and yeah, doing great.
And she got into this, not because, but just because she's a very talented person, and she's sold herself. So both of you have been these incredibly driven people, in one sense, and you've come to a point in your life, it seems to me, both of you, where those types of motivations and drives are up for question for you. That is no longer particularly satisfying. And somehow you then got into writing children's books, which I think some of your friends think you're absolutely insane, don't they?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
Angela, why don't you talk about that?
I think Alex's career is definitely more decorated than mine, but I've been lucky enough to try my hand at a few things. I worked in journalism and then I worked in investment banking. And I think you and your audience know about this better than anyone, that the ego always sort of operates from a sense of lack. You're always sort of lacking something. You're always sort of trying to fulfill this void, which is actually abysmal, but we don't know it. And so I think there's there are many ways to filling this void, and the one that I have often chosen in my life is with achievement and with an ability to maybe be impressive to people in my family even. But every time you achieve what you think is, should be the ultimate thing that sort of turns everything around, that makes you feel whole, another sense of lack sort of comes in, and you sort of start to realize that all of those things, none of those things in fact will fill the void, because the void is inside you, and it's an abysmal void. And the only way to really fill it is to find your center, is to, as cliche as this is going to sound, to be yourself, and to accept yourself. Self-acceptance is self-love. And so I think I was, first of all, very lucky to be able to try a few different careers. I started working when I was 16 years old. I moved to Paris on like a modeling contract. And so from 16 until now, I'm 29 now, for 13 years that I was, a taxpayer, I was trying to look for something that was always there. And the minute that I realized it was always there, and that my job was to go and cultivate it, everything kind of made sense all at once. And it's something that I, of course, still struggle with on a day-to-day basis. But I kind of have a compass now to find it. I know where it is, and it's not in finance, and it's not in money or status or fame or any of number of things that I think are, to many people, very worthy pursuits. But it's in fact embracing who I am and what I naturally love to do.
And that's not an easy thing to do, embracing oneself.
I think it's the most difficult thing to do. Yeah.
And potentially
it's the most beautiful. It's the most difficult thing I've done so far.
Yeah.
And I'm still doing it, and I'll probably do it until the day I die.
Yeah. And well, let's hope so. Once you've done the difficult task of finding out who you are, and then you go on and do it on purpose, losing that is particularly painful. I can tell you, having met people who've then subsequently given up on themselves, it's a particularly painful decision to do that. So I wouldn't, if I was you, I wouldn't advise you do that. But what's interesting is that once we get into an authentic relationship to ourselves, we then don't really know where it's going to go, is the truth. It's got a life of its own, very much so. And what it's making me think of is that most people know about the concept of karma, and then they have this sort of weird concept that karma is you're going to get your just desserts, or what you deserve, or some, I don't know, some weird. But actually, karma goes with a concept called dharma. And karma essentially means something like comfortableness with yourself and happiness with yourself and the way that you are, so that you don't have to be sort of reincarnated just to learn life's lessons. You've learned life's lessons, and the reason you've learned life's lessons is because you've accepted your dharma, and dharma is meaning or purpose. So we discover our meaning and purpose, and we accept it, and then our karma is great. That's essentially the lesson of karma and dharma. It seems to me that you've gone some way, and both of you have gone some way into this dharmic thing, discovering your meaning and purpose. And then whatever you do, and the theory of dharma goes like this: whatever you then do, as long as you're in touch with your meaning and purpose, it's going to be fine. You're going to be okay. You're going to feel okay. So don't worry about it too much. Your karma will be fine. So you can chill and all of that sort of stuff. And both of you have come to some sort of dharmic understanding of yourselves, it seems to me. Alex, you're looking like you want to jump in there somehow.
I was more wondering if I've actually gotten that far. I kind of agree with Angela that it's a lifelong journey. I guess what I've done, I don't want to claim I've reached any kind of enlightenment about these points, but I guess what I've done is known enough to step off the track of something that wasn't leading me there, and to try to figure out what would be more in sync with, I guess, my soul. And I do love to write, and I love to help other people. And so, a very small thing we could do was to do this children's book. I think I mentioned I wrote another one. I wrote that for my daughter, really, when she was born, because we spent like years trying to have a baby and went through a lot of difficult periods. And I wanted to tell her story in a way that when she was, old enough to be able to start to piece it together would be a lovely way to tell her about her past. So that both these have been for me very personal and sincere experiences, maybe the most of the things I've done for a long time. And
I think the theme of authenticity is coming through in that. There's something about, again, coming back to children, sort of why I'm going off on these tangents is because what I do, that's what I do, sort of hazard of being in my profession, that I follow these sort of tangents. But secondly, I know that because we've got the very serious, important task of promoting this book. Okay, and I think it should be promoted because I think it needs to be read very widely. And so we're going to be working with you here in the UK, trying to get it as wide an audience as possible. But I wouldn't be promoting it so much if you two were not involved with it. Because this is a book that you two have written from your souls, if I don't sound a bit too highfalutin. And that the essence of who you are and your experience in life is somehow in this book. And that I think part of, I don't know, I'm guessing here, I think part of the motivation of wanting to write it is because you've both struggled in life. And that you want to, and you've got some insight into how to stop that pointless struggle, which is struggle against reality and truth, and the truth of yourself is a waste of time and it will just cause a lot of pain. And you've got some insights, genuine, hard-earned insights, which I think you put in the book, and it comes across very strongly. So when I'm going off on these tangents, it's really because I want people who are listening and watching to understand how genuine you two are and how safe their children are in reading this book, because you've brought your struggles and your understanding, your knowledge into it. And so if a parent sits down and reads this book with their kids, they're reading the wisdom of both of you. And wisdom is not age and anything like that. Wisdom is, I've learned life's lessons. So I've incorporated life's lessons and I've allowed them to change me. And make me wise. That's what wisdom is. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in the book. So that's why I'm going off the tangents, not to stop you promoting the book, but I think the book is best promoted by understanding you too.
It's very kind of you to articulate it that way. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're being very generous. When we were having our sort of introductory chat, as we just met only a few days ago, I think we discussed something like, the opposite of addiction is connection.
Yeah.
And the opposite of pain is love. And so I think, like we don't have a word for, sort of the opposite of loneliness or of despair or of the anxiousness and confusion and the seduction of despair during this period. But if we had a word for it, that's, the word I would probably use to describe like where the spirit of this book sort of came from. Yeah. Is connection and love and all of these wonderful things that, make sort of this place a coherent whole. That is, what we yearn for and what we long for, and why, like you said earlier, why I read Dr. Seuss's books, and he says no one can be youer than you, and it still touches me in places that I never knew existed. Yes. And every time I read it, it's a new dimension of what that means.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I think because he put so much love and care and grace into those words, that's the same place that I think we wrote this book from.
Yeah. Okay, we've got some pages now. James has got the book downloaded. So what I'd like to do is maybe start doing some screenshots of some of the pages, and we can just scroll through and then talk about them. And then what you've just talked about, Angela, will shine through, which is the care and love that you've put into it will become apparent. So James, if you just start at the beginning and start scrolling through the book, and then myself, Alex or Angela will just say stop at various points, and we can begin to start talking about some of the images and some of the concepts. So here we are.
Yeah, so even in the first page, we had this, we worked with a brilliant illustrator and a friend of ours from Uruguay, talking about collaboration between continents. And what he wanted to do was he wanted to angle the sort of the street so that it would be a child sort of looking up at the street around her. And so, the closed signs and the people walking around with their masks on, they look so much larger than life, because as a kid, everything just looks so huge. And that's, part of the reason why it can be sort of daunting, is that it's so big.
And what strikes me about it as well, talking about the theme that we've been talking about, is that in some we're all pushed into that perspective at the moment. And
that's right.
The book captures it in this opening scene, but actually it's a real experience for all of us, that this big thing is really big, and is pushing us into a space in which we feel quite small. So if you scroll up a bit more, James, this is great. No, I mean to the next page.
Yeah, this page we spent a long time on, Angela and I, on the words. I mean, first of all, the thing on a children's book is it's only about 1,000 words usually. So every word really matters. And, on this one, if you see, can you scroll down a little bit more, James? I want to show it towards the bottom of the page. You'll see the text. It says, for thousands of years, this virus lived in bats. The bats learned to live with the virus. And now scroll up again. It says, one day the virus jumped onto a man and he became very sick. So Angela did a lot of thinking on this word jumped. We were trying to figure out, how do you come up with a word to explain how a virus goes from one person to another? Yeah. That's a complicated concept. What is a word that would work for a child? So the word jumped was one that we felt children could relate to. And as we talked to them, they understood that. But you'll see in this picture, we've got a cityscape that could be any city in the world, which was intentional, whether it's Beijing or New York or Sao Paulo. And we've got the virus coming out of a person. You can see he's coughing and it's going all around. And you've got the big COVID kind of image up in the top left, almost like a sun, and then smaller ones. This is a bit of a scary picture. And
it's a bit dark.
We wanted to really be clear that this is a complicated and scary subject, but it's also one that we can manage our way through. And so we didn't shy away from trying to do that.
Yeah, and again, I would validate that, because I think that otherwise what you do is you're saying to a child that their experience and their fears are somehow diminished and not real. Yeah, and so I think it is important to capture something of the actual reality of the fear that's going on. Okay, keep going, Jane. And then keep going. I think we'll just keep going a little bit. So we're hearing Becky here, what she likes to do.
And we wanted to make her, she's a very sort of precocious, a very brave little girl. And, she doesn't like the usual sort of, she's not thinking about like wearing a skirt or dressing up as a princess. She's very adventurous. She wants to go and catch baby crabs and build sandcastles. She has her own dominion. And some of that has been taken away from her because of this this pandemic.
And then we get that classic line, I think, which we talked about, Alex, is she can't smell them or hug them, her grandparents. Again, it's precisely how a child would experience loss. And it's you know, we would imagine they lose certain types of things, but actually no, those are the things that they miss, is the smell and the feel, the kinetic feel. If I go back into my child, I remember my mum died many, many years ago, but I can still remember the kinetic feel of her and being in her arms and the smell. Those things stay with us. And we know that neurologically those things stay with us. And when, for example, we have neurological brain disorders, smell is one of the things that can still bring back memory. And so we use therapy with people that have neurological disorders.
That's right.
These are very powerful and primal experiences. Keep going, James. And some more details of what she liked. So we're getting a sense of the loss of her favourite things. And then we see the image that we've seen before of the cupcake and her possibly being depressed and dad being too adult with her and not getting into her world as much. And then the big thing. And then comes this classic moment, I think, that when she starts to talk to the teacher, who is the adult that can sort of enter into her world and understand what her needs are. Safe adult, Mrs. Eva. And Mrs. Eva, she listens quietly and she asks Bea, if we pay attention to your worries, if we observe them closely, can we still find a silver lining? And a silver lining, Mrs. Eva says, is a good side of something that looks bad. And Bea answers, wherever there are feelings, Mrs. Eva said, there are good feelings too. Yes, Bea answers. She often wishes she could ask her parents questions, but they are not around. Then she asks them questions all day long. So Bea then, from that idea, discovers what are the things that she's gained from experience, as well as the losses. And that is a key moment in the story. I think that's sort of enough sharing of the screen sharing. I wanted people to see that and see the way it's written, because it is so beautifully done. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that when I've talked to my friends throughout this quarantine period, almost universally, the positive that everybody comments on is the amount of time they get to spend with people they love, if they live with them, and or how they've reached out to people they haven't been in touch with. And Angela, when we were writing this, she said a couple times, we have to get across the message that nobody can do this alone. We need the community behind us to help us. And so for B, it's her teacher, it's her parents, right? She gets to ask her parents questions all day long. That's great for a child, maybe not for a parent, but it's great for a child.
No, it's fantastic. I mean, there are many really positive things that are happening in this book, which I think should go across. And I want to circle back to something I said earlier on, which is one of the most positive things about this book, is that it's difficult, dangerous subjects, and it's placing them in the context of something that is inherently safe, which is sitting with your mum and dad and reading a story. That activity in itself is inherently a safe activity. And by doing that, what we do, and again, for any parents who might be anxious about, sitting and reading a book about the virus while the virus is going on, is that what that does is that it makes this big, scary thing safe. Because what's basically safe in life, and I think the teacher tells us this, is that when we're engaged in an understandable relationship with somebody that we trust as a child, whatever it is that we're dealing with becomes manageable, because the relationship contains it. That's what happens with the teacher. The teacher contains all these fears, and in the relationship to the child allows the child then to contain the experience. And that's what we'll do as a parent if we sit down and read this book with our children who may be frightened or depressed about what's going on. Is the fact of the strength of our relationship to them will allow the child to process these things, these big scary things, and feel okay about it. As well as another technical point about narrative structures. Narrative structures in themselves allow us to process difficult things and come through them, because they have a beginning, a middle, and end, a resolution. There's that narrative structure is there, and with that resolution, we have the catharsis of the scary stuff happening, we get through it,
Yeah.
and then we have the resolution. And that narrative structure, beginning, middle, and end, allows every human being in a narrative culture to be able to process something. So there's lots of things psychologically, lots of mature things happening there. And it was interesting, I thought, that you chose a 5-year-old. Because of this thing. I think there's so many levels on which that works therapeutically. Have we lost Angela? I think she's frozen. No, she's back with us. Okay.
Am I frozen?
No, you're back.
So we've got about 15 minutes left, which gives us plenty of time. But I'm interested in why 5 years old as opposed to 15, or what was the intuitive thinking behind that?
I think it was kind of a natural decision that we made, which is, 5 years old is kind of in the zone, and I'm by no means an expert on this, but like 5 years old is in a zone in which children, at least my friends' children, are starting to ask questions like, what is death? Am I going to die someday? Is that tree over there going to die someday? And it's a period in which they start to understand some of these difficult subjects. They're starting to come out of this kind of blissful, completely, kind of happy, naive, kind of this precious place, and then they're coming into a world that they realize is a little bit more complicated than they initially thought. And so, and it's also, the period in which, they're absorbing so much information from the world around them, about who their parents are, who they are, what their favorite toy means to them, about all of the things that they love that they will tell you about to represent their individuality, right? Like, I am a little girl who doesn't love the color pink. I love the color green. That says something about me as an individual. Yeah. And so we kind of felt like that was the right age to sort of place, but it's still, like you said, still a very, very safe place. It's still a place in which if her mother came into the room and said, everything will be okay, she'll believe her. Yeah. Whereas, when we become adults and I'm having a bad day and, someone I love says it'll be okay, there's a part of me that is too cynical to just accept that at face value now, but at 5 years old, I think they're still very much able to feel protected by the love and the safety net around them.
Yeah. And so in some ways, I suppose that speaks to that vulnerability in all of us, or that need of us to have somebody to believe again, that somebody can say that it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There is something going on, I think, in terms of the lockdown and being pushed into our homes. And think about our politicians making decisions, which is, I think there's a very interesting dynamic going on. And it's maybe slightly different in our countries, but I think there's some similarities still. Something
yes.
Yeah, I mean, because I think the US has this sort of very vibrant individuality culture. And it's very much part of your culture that people should challenge individually going on. And it's not as much in the UK culture. In the UK culture, we're much more used to standing in a queue and just going, oh, that's what you do. Whereas you might challenge it a bit more in the US. But I think, there is this thing of governments around the world saying to us, well, look, we're going to make decisions for you that you have been making for yourself up till now, like going out, going to work, etc.
Yeah.
And so inevitably, that's a parent-child relationship. Inevitably, that's a parent-child relationship, because that's what a parent is to a child.
Yeah, sure. And what's so important about that is trust. It's what both of you just said. So Angela said, at a 5-year-old, you trust your parent, whatever she says. I think in the United States, what at least I'm experiencing is in some states, because we are the United States, we're different states, and really the governors have taken the parental role. And if I think about maybe the best example of this, in New York State, hardest hit, the governor there, Andrew Cuomo, his daily press conferences were watched across the country by, probably a third of the country, I'm guessing, because he was so much like what you want a parent to be in a crisis, which is he was comforting, he was knowledgeable, and he was clear. And you left those feeling confident that the person in charge, your parent, was doing the right things.
Yeah. You're nodding away there, Angela. Is that similar to you?
Yeah, I think we've been, in the state of California, we've been fortunate enough to have another surrogate parent, because at the federal level, we're not exactly sure what our parents are saying. So at the state level, we've been very fortunate to have, parents that have been very, very careful, have been very diligent with their efforts to try and protect, the vulnerable and the young, the old.
I mean, without a doubt, at the federal level, you have somebody who's highly dysfunctional. And, if I was, still in social services and that was actually a parent of a child, I'd be looking at intervention, to be honest. So, I mean, I think that's quite clear. But yes, I get it that the different states have responded in different ways. And certainly there has been, from our perspective, my perspective, looking at the response of California and looking at the response of New York, has felt closer to home in terms of the response that we've had, is to sort of very much take that role. I guess the point I wanted to make about having a children's book at this moment and why it might resonate and why 5 seems to make intuitively a correct thing is that because around the globe we are being pushed into that child space, not just emotionally, because I think it's so big and frightening, but because our government has done that, and our government has stepped in and made parental decisions, and they continue to make parental decisions, and we need them to make parental decisions because this thing is far too big. Otherwise, it can't be dealt with. In reality, it can't be dealt with on any other level. And one would hope, this is my hope, that we get transnational sort of responses soon. And there's something, I think, about your book, which it picks up on that zeitgeist, that we're all looking at the moment for good parenting. Because it's not possible, because we are literally children in the face of this huge global thing. I mean, there's no way I can deal with it.
We tried to, again, most of the good ideas here came from Angela, it really did. We tried to come up with names. It's true. We tried to come up with names that would work in many different cultures. So names that were not long, names that would work in Latin America as easily as they'd work in California or maybe in China. And the other goal was to make the images agnostic to any part of the world. So the cityscapes could be anywhere. We have it in Chinese and in all the languages in Europe and in Portuguese and Spanish. And intentionally, this was our little way of saying this is a transnational issue and children are going to be experiencing it in very similar ways in whatever country they're in. So how could you tell it in a way that everyone could relate to?
And if we take the metaphor of child, because we are all children, dealing with this thing, in some ways quite literally, and I think that's why it's quite important, and that's why I think it's really important to get this thing out there, because I think it is speaking on all those levels, and also I think there is something about both of you in that you again, you're very to a British audience, you're going to be much more recognizable in some ways because of your self-deprecating manner.
We can wait in lines too. We're pretty good at that.
But actually, the point I'm making is that there's a lot of life experience and wisdom from both of you that has gone into creating what on the surface looks like a very simple thing. And of course, it's not simple at all. Einstein said it very, very clearly, and he actually named us 5-year-old as the age. If you can explain a complex subject to a 5-year-old, you bloody well know
that's right.
One of the most intelligent people on the planet saying that, and that's the truth. And I think that you have explained this thing well to a 5-year-old, which tells me that somehow you bloody well understand what's going on at the moment. And maybe not on a cognitive intellectual level. You're not epidemiologists, you're not experts on viruses, but you're
pathogens,
exactly, but you are experts on your own selves, it seems to me. And that's what you brought into play here.
That's the nicest compliment you could give us, Noel. Or
yeah, it was so deep. It was like going all the way going back to Socratic, like freedom is self-mastery stuff. Very, very deep.
But it is the truth. And I think it's the truth that sort of excellence involves personal life journeys. One of the things is I was very excited about because I get all these things. My PR company are great. Teresa from Love PR. I better name them, otherwise she'll beat the crap out of me next time she meets. They're great at getting me loads of things to do on news media, and I'm busy. I do these things, and I go knowledge, chuck it onto the email. But this was one of the few ones I stopped and went, oh wow, this has really captured me. Which is why I said to them that I want to meet them. Let's get them on the show and let's talk about this, because I really, really enjoyed writing the review, and I was really inspired because I thought it was a well put together children's book, and a well put together children's book is a well put together human book. It's a well put together human experience book, because, as I say, and as somebody much more clever than me, Einstein, said, if you can explain complex big subjects to a 5-year-old, you've really wrapped your head around it well. And I would encourage everybody who comes across this book to download a copy. It's free. You can get it on the website www.thebigthing.org. It's on the page. We'll put it out on the when it goes out in the podcast and all the information so that you can get it. And then we're going to be working with these two amazing people at trying to get some press coverage here in the UK, because I think if we could get this out there, this is the time for it to go out there. And it'll be a book for our times. I think people look back and go, wow, those people. We've got a couple of minutes left, and that's the plug done. And I just wanted to do a couple of minutes just to wind down and talk about what sort of things that are you thinking possibly of doing next. This dynamic duo that are here with me on the Zoom. What are your next plans, do you think?
Just, I'm probably going to go and make a snack after this. And I have this book in front of me that I've been meaning to read called The Sympathizer, and do some work. And, that's as far as I've gone. That's as far as I can go in terms of the day.
As usual, Angela's being overly self-deprecating. I'm personally going to go walk my dog. I've got a big red Labrador.
Oh.
He's been sitting outside here.
You're so much more ambitious.
Last hour. No, what I was going to say is yesterday while walking the dog, I did speak to Angela and I said, God, the best part about this was working with you. Can we do something else? And so I'm trying to convince her for our next writing project, but it's still to be determined what that might be.
So we can't get a sneak preview then of.
I don't think we know. Do you know, Angela? I don't know what it is yet.
I mean, we both have our own personal websites, which publishes, all the works. Alex writes, an op-ed for something important every week. So I'm sure you can follow him on his own website, and yeah.
So tell us Alex's website, because he will never tell us. So Angela, you tell us Alex's website, and then Alex will tell us your website.
I think it's alexanderfriedman.com. Is that right?
No, it's actually alexfriedman.org.
.org. Okay.
Yeah, we give away all the books, all the profits. But I mean, actually, what I do is I founded something called Jackson Hole Economics, which is a free resource for people with kind of opinion views from some thoughtful folks from around the world about pressing problems. And the motto of it is ideas should be free, because everything's behind paywalls now. And so if you're interested, it's jheconomics.com. And we set it up here in Wyoming because this is the biggest intact ecosystem in the United States. And our view was that so many of the problems that we face today as a kind of species come from not having appreciated the commons, or put the other way, the tragedy of the commons, where we've all been trying to pursue our own interests at the expense of others. And so the goal was to try to create a forum for thinking where we were looking at ideas from a more sustainable perspective. So I do a lot of work for that, but it's what I really like to do is another project with Angela, if I can convince her.
I'm sure we're going to put loads of pressure on her, make sure you do. So it's JHEconomics.com.
Yeah, JH Economics, yeah.
Just spell economics for me, because my spelling is dreadful.
Oh, ECONOMICS. Or I have the same stuff on my own. It's alexfriedman.org, FRIEDMAN.
I'll just put that up there. And Angela, tell us your website where we can find more about you.
Oh, I have a little website that I've only just started to post some of my writing, some of my personal writing, which I think I sent one or two to you the other day. It's just angela.xyz.
Angela.xyz.
Mm-hmm. It's a new it's like a new domain.
That is.
Yeah.
Very cool.
People are doing XYZ. We're going all the way to XYZ now.
Okay, I'm just going to put that in the chat as well, so that people can go and find out about you more. And I'll just, that's odd. There we go. Angela Meng.
And for anyone who wants to, give us suggestions for our book, which we're, doing for free, and whatever proceeds we get from the print version, we'll go to Unicef USA here. They can email us, and all of our contact information for the team is on the website, thebigthing.org.
And we've got the website already in the chat. It's such a joy to have you on the show. Really, real pleasure, actually. A great book, a great project. I do hope you produce another book. And maybe one of the things that the sort of listeners and viewers could think of is what their next project might be. What could they take on apart from sort of downhill after a pandemic? Once you've sorted it, what's left to do? I don't know, but I'm sure you'll think of something. But it's really, really lovely to have you both on the show. Great evening talking.
Thank you very much, Noel.
Thank you. You've been so generous. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, look, it's maybe it's generosity, but it's not. I think I'm very, very committed to the idea of good mental health, and I see this book as being part of really good mental health. I can't promote it enough, to be honest. So, I think it will have a really, really helpful impact on children who read it and parents who read it. It's a really good resource. Partly because it's a fun story to read. They've got that narrative structure. It's clever because you two are clever, and so you put yourselves into it. And it's not trying to explain the stuff, which is what all the other books I've read on the pandemic for children is at the moment, is trying to explain what it is. And I don't think kids need an explanation of what it is necessarily. What they need is a bloody good story that'll help them process it. And I think in this book that's what they've got. And so I think we should get it out there. So maybe it's generosity, maybe it is. Maybe I'm just self-deprecating like you two are. Who knows?
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the pleasure of speaking with you.
Stay with me, because we're going to go offline, but you two stay with me. So James, I think that's the end of the show. So if you want to cut us off, and thanks everybody. I can't remember who we've got on next week. Somebody. See you next week with another amazing person. Bye-bye for now.